All right, we're back for another episode of The Install with Greg Cosell of NFL Films. That's the main man himself. I'm your host, Buck Reising. If you're new to the show, if you're joining the show 10 weeks in, then, what have you been doing? But if you're just now checking in, we appreciate you hanging out with us, and we're always glad to have new listeners throughout the course of the season. Greg, tough sledding for the Tennessee Titans again in Tampa Bay. They are now 3-6. They are getting ready to go on their third straight road trip, this one a divisional game, against the Jacksonville Jags team that just got embarrassed at home.
Yeah, which I think was probably a big surprise on the NFL schedule this past weekend. We know that the Niners, at their best, are a very, very good team, but the Jaguars were playing really good football, and they were home. And, I don't think, people might have thought they could lose to the Niners because the Niners are good, but that was kind of a beatdown a little bit. And obviously I watched that tape. But, just a couple of quick points, I think, before we get to Jacksonville on the Titans. And none of what I'm saying is going to probably be profound as if I'm speaking from the mountaintop. But, it's just so hard to compete in this league with a really subpar offensive line. And there's not much they can do about it now. I mean, the old expression, you got to dance with the girl who brung you. We're kind of at that point in the season. I mean, what are we going into week 11? We're a week from Thanksgiving. It's not as if, Hall of Famers are going to fall out of the sky to play left tackle or right guard or whatever position you're speaking about. That's not going to happen. And I guess my point is it's a hard workaround. That's the thing. There's only so much you can do. And there are situations where there's little you can do, and you just have to kind of hope for the best. And I'm not trying to be funny or sarcastic, but it's kind of the way it is.
No, I think people are realistic about that,
Yeah.
right? I mean, really, with the exception of I'm blanking on the name of the Seattle Seahawks left tackle who just Jason Peters, who just dropped in there and held up pretty well at the age of 42.
Yeah, he's playing right tackle for them, correct?
There's not a lot of solutions out there at this point, and beyond them trying to shuffle the deck as best they can. This week it looks like it'll be Dylan Radins at left tackle, and you saw what that experiment might look like, perhaps a little better with a week to prepare.
Yeah, and they're going to play against, he's going to have Josh Allen. It could be Trayvon Walker. It's probably mostly Josh Allen, and Josh Allen is a load as a pass rusher. So again, to take it to an X and O perspective, and we've discussed this before, but just in case we do have some new listeners, or just to reiterate, the issue you face from an X and O standpoint when you throw the football, particularly when you get into a second and long or a third and long situation, is you have to take eligible receivers away from being eligible receivers so they can help you pass protect. And you never want to be in that situation. That's no offensive coach wants to do anything other than send out all five eligibles. But if you can't protect, you can't do that, because bottom line is, and I remember learning this, I think the first offensive coach I ever got the opportunity to talk to years and years and years ago, probably when I was a young man, Buck, was, he told me that you have no pass game if you can't protect.
Right.
It's a very simple but true point. And we saw what happened this past week with Levis. Boy, did he get hit a lot.
Yeah.
And you know what? It's funny. With each game, obviously the statistics have been less, but I would say with each game, sort of my admiration for him has gone up as a potential quality NFL quarterback. Because look, that first game when he threw the 4 touchdowns, what did we say after that first game? I said, that's not going to happen every week, so don't expect that. And then the second game where he really hung in there and stood in there and made some throws. And then this week where there were just too many plays where he had no chance.
Right. And that's just kind of the nature of the beast right now. And basically, Greg, and you and I talked about this before we started recording, basically this is what we're going to do for the rest of the season, depending on how competitive the Titans end up, is looking at Will Levis and how he manages these situations week in and week out, because that's now what their season basically becomes.
And the second point, and of course that was the case this week, is a total inability to run the football. And if they can't do that at all, then it's really, really hard. Again, no one's expecting Derrick Henry to go 25 for 150 every week. We're past that point. That's not going to happen. But what were the final numbers? I know at one point he was 11 for 25. Was that final?
Yeah, he ended up averaging 2.3 yards per carry.
Yeah, I mean, then it's just really too hard. And what happens is then you need players, and I hate to be cliched, but it is true. Then you need players to make plays. Like, for instance, the first play of the third quarter. When they come out with a shot play and he throws to Westbrook-Ikhine, which was a beautiful ball, he's got to catch that ball. I mean, I'm not saying it's a routine easy catch. Okay, I don't want people to think, oh, what are you saying? But he's got to lay out and catch that ball. I mean, that in those kinds of games with the situation they're in, those plays have to be made.
Yeah, no, they need as much to go right as humanly possible to be able to even function right now, and they can't afford what we'll call it a missed opportunity, for lack of a better term, or things like drops with Chigakonkwo, which has been one of the more frustrating points of their entire season, Greg. I mean,
he dropped a touchdown. I know that was a little bit of a hummer, but it had to be because it was between David and White in the red zone where things happen really fast. And it was actually a terrific read by Levis, and he threw it with perfect timing because you can't wait. That extra fraction would have allowed both linebackers to converge. And I know it came out hard. I mean, that's the way it is. It's the NFL. He's got to catch that ball.
Yeah, no, it's been like that all year long. So now Jacksonville is the opponent. Titans continue to be winless on the road, and certainly going to the division leader this week will be difficult. It's only the second AFC South game, Greg, that they've played on the season, so technically not dead yet.
Yeah.
But with Jacksonville, let's start with the defense, because the San Francisco game, a bit of an outlier on their season. This defense has improved markedly year over year, and Josh Allen has been a huge part of that.
Yeah, and what you're going to see, if we want to get into some real specifics, which hopefully people appreciate, is because of the way the Titans play with multiple tight ends, and they still do that a good amount. You're going to see what we call big nickel. You're going to see the Jaguars play with 3 safeties. So they're going to play big nickel. And their 2 main safeties are Jenkins, who I think is a really, really good player, and Cisco, who's more of a back end player, but very solid. And the third safety is Wingard. So you're going to see them play a lot of big nickel. And now they'll still play base. 5-2 is their base front, and the 2 stacked linebackers are Oluokun, who's a really good football player, never comes off the field, and Lloyd, who in his second year is still struggling a bit with the term we use, key and diagnose. You can catch him, and I think that's something they'll be looking to do with misdirection elements and not gimmicks. Misdirection is not a gimmick. I'm not talking about gimmicks, flea flickers and all that. I'm not saying you won't see that, once, but that's not what I'm speaking about. I'm talking about with basic structure. A counter run is a misdirection play, but you might see boot and try to throw it back. Those kinds of plays, which are not gimmicks. But Lloyd still struggles with what he sees, and therefore, despite being a high-level athlete for the position, just oftentimes is just a beat late in reacting to things.
It is a good group against the run, or at least it has been throughout the course of the year. And I know Trayvon Walker is not first overall pick worthy to date yet, Greg, but he is still adept as a part of that group at taking away what we know that the Titans are going to try and do in this game and could not do against Tampa Bay.
Correct. But no, he hasn't become the sort of the pass rusher at this point in his career that they hoped. But no, he's still a big body. He's over 270 pounds. And they're good inside. They're not household names, but they're good inside. So they're not an easy group to run against. Tyson Campbell's their best corner. He's their boundary corner. They play boundary and field corners. So he will likely be the boundary corner. Now, it's very possible in this game, because he has done it in the past, that he could match up to Hopkins. At times, Campbell will do that. That becomes how the coaching staff feels. I can't say one way or the other. I'm just letting people know that he's done that in the past, because he is their best corner. And when they're in base, the other outside corner is Williams, who's a good player, but he's smaller. So, they probably would not like him on a consistent basis to match up to DeAndre Hopkins.
From one defense to another, Greg, the Titans defense will look to get some reinforcements back in the secondary. Sean Murphy-Bunting is trending in the right direction. Roger McCreary obviously getting an interception in this last game, which the Titans have not done very much at all. This season. Only their third pick on the year. Trevor Lawrence and Doug Peterson together in their second year. So far, nine touchdowns to 6 interceptions, just over 2,100 yards passing for Trevor Lawrence. What have you made of him first before we talk about how they'll try to attack the team schematically?
I think overall, I know the numbers, don't suggest, wow, he's playing great football.
Sure.
I think overall he's played well. Last week they were overmatched on the offensive line, and it was pretty interesting to watch. I mean, they've got Cam Robinson at left tackle. They've got the rookie Anton Harrison at right tackle, and for the most part, he's played well. But of course, last week going against Nick Bosa, who's a top 3 edge player in the NFL, he really kind of was taken to school a little bit. It was kind of a welcome to the NFL. You're playing against the big boys now.
Right.
You're not in the Big 12 anymore. And he really had a difficult time. And they're playing Walker Little at left guard, probably because of injury. Now, Walker Little's a fascinating guy. He came out of the state of Texas, and he went to Stanford as a top 5 recruit in the entire country. And he played really well as a freshman at Stanford, and then got hurt and really never played again in college, any meaningful snaps. He's a left tackle. They moved him to guard. He played left tackle earlier in the year when Cam Robinson, he was suspended, I believe, earlier in the year, if memory serves me correctly.
Correct.
And Walker played a bunch of left tackle and actually played well. I'm not there, and I'm not an offensive line guru, so I don't think he's really a guard, but they're playing him there, and he struggled a bit this past week. But again, the Niners put out some players. I mean, Javon Hargrave is a really, really difficult guy. I mean, he is strong, and he just bull rushed him quite a bit because Walker's tall, and normally your guards are not 6'6", 6'7".
Yeah, it's crazy to me that the Niners have consistently found ways to either draft these defensive linemen or find ways to acquire them,
right? Like
Hargrave, or in this instance now Chase Young after the trade.
Right, who looked really good last week. But anyway, getting back to the Jags, I think their offensive line is beatable. And again, when I say that, I don't mean every play, but it is beatable. Lawrence has played well. I think he's very talented. I think he throws a beautiful ball. I think the ball this year comes out with a little more juice. He's mobile. You have to be careful about that. He can use his legs effectively. They can attack and stretch the field at all 3 levels. So, they do present a problem. And with the receiving core, they have Kirk, who can line up anywhere. He's a really good player. Everybody, kind of threw a fit when they signed him for what they did. But within the context of their offense and how he's deployed, he's a really good player. And then there's Calvin Ridley, who's as good a route runner as there is in the league. And Evan Ingram is he's a tight end that can really run. I don't know if you were at the combine the year he came out, but he ran a 4.42. I mean, he's a guy that, he's an SEC guy, obviously. He can really run. They move him all around. They detach him from the formation. You have to have a plan for all this because he's going to line up in multiple spots. The last thing you ever want to see, and I'm always surprised by this, but I see it, more than I think I should. But again, I'm not a coach, is when all of a sudden you see, let's say, a tight end line up wide, and all of a sudden 5 guys on the defense are pointing like, oh, no, he's over there. Well, you kind of should know that, in your preparation for the game, because England's going to line up everywhere. And they play multiple tight ends at times. So, I mean, they do a lot of things on offense.
Well, and I've really enjoyed watching their offense, Greg. And the thing I think that's been frustrating, at least at the start of the season with the Jags, is how many missed opportunities that they had, particularly in the red zone. They had drops a lot that were really, really plaguing them. The question to me hasn't been about like the offense itself. It's just been a lot about the execution for this to not be a better version of what we've seen so far.
And that's a great point, Buck, and I agree with that. I mean, if you look at this offense, you feel that they're really good, and it just hasn't worked out quite that way. And we haven't even mentioned Travis Etienne. And he's an explosive player, and he's another guy that can detach from the formation. We saw him a couple of weeks ago catch a touchdown pass against the Steelers where he was split out to the right. And, you have to be aware that you're going to see those formations. You can't be surprised by that. That has to be worked on all week so that when Etienne splits out outside the numbers, that, hey, you automatically have that check, whatever they call it, blue, and you know exactly what you're doing. You don't see 3 guys kind of looking at each other. That all has to be taken care of. But in an ideal world, you really would like to be in a position in this game where when you do get into passing situations, you're able to get bodies around Lawrence. Not that he can't function. That's not my point. But, no quarterback loves to be squeezed in the pocket, and you want to really be able to get some pressure on him.
Defense is doing all it can right now. What we've talked about this before.
Oh, yeah,
Have
yeah.
an offense like the Titans who can't
it's hard.
score.
It's too hard. I mean, we don't need to reiterate the same points. We started with that. But, when you struggle to move the ball, get first downs, and score, that just permeates your entire team and makes everything else seem harder.
Yeah.
And then, so here's what happens. One bad play by the defense becomes magnified in the minds of everybody.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're scoring, and again, when I say scoring, I don't mean you have to put up 40, but if you're just kind of scoring normally and you can get 24, one bad play just seems like, oh, okay, it's a bad play. Let's go on to the next one, but when you're not scoring, those plays seem like, oh my God, how could he let that happen?
Oh, Greg, 24 points around here is an oasis in the desert. They were averaging 17.5 last year. They're averaging 17.1 right now. It's pretty.
Well, at least they're consistent, Buck.
Woo! that is certainly a way to
strive for consistency,
to capitalize that. God, like every coach I've ever worked with has ever said, consistency is key. There you have it. The NFL match show this weekend gets you ready, of course. Greg, for all the bad vibes around the local professional football team, people are fired up around here for Josh Dobbs. He's playing in prime time.
Oh my God, I'm doing a piece on him in the show this week.
I was going to ask you, I assume, because that's Sunday night football between the Vikings on the road at Denver, who just got a big win themselves.
Yeah, well, the reason I'm doing a piece is because Denver has beaten Buffalo and Kansas City in their last two games, and they've used the spy tactic on both Patrick Mahomes and on Josh Allen. So that's part of what they do on third down. There's a play from this past week with Josh Dobbs against New Orleans where New Orleans spied and he beat it. And so I'm doing that play. But so that's the reason I'm doing it, because it tactically works. But what Dobbs is doing is remarkable. I always wonder, it made me think, I think about it with Geno Smith. I think about it with Josh Dobbs. Mm-hmm. And there's no answer to this. But what I think about is what happens if these guys were given an opportunity in year 3 or 4, I know Smith was a starter for 2 years and then it did, people thought it didn't work. But what if he was allowed to play that next year? Would Geno Smith have been able to do this in year 4 or 5 as opposed to year 10? What if Josh Dobbs was truly given an opportunity? Now, we don't know the answer to any of this. Maybe he wouldn't have been ready. Maybe he would have developed and been this guy in year 3. We don't know. But, it's just the kinds of things I think about when I watch them, because, Dobbs is, I think, in his 7th year now.
Yeah, 2017.
Yes. And given what he's done, coming to the Titans last year and 8 days later starting and looking like a professional quarterback, starting for the Cards this year. And no one's saying he was great, but he was a professional quarterback. And now going to the Vikings, and then, the first game he played, he didn't even know the cadence. And then only with one true week of practice to be able to do what he did last week. He made some throws, by the way. It wasn't just Dobbs running around. He made some big time NFL throws. So, pretty impressive. And I was around him once years ago. He was a senior in college and he was actually doing work at this event, which blew me away, but that's the kid. That's the kind of kid he is, but he's a really impressive kid. Have you had a chance to talk to him over the years?
Yeah, no, I know him pretty well. I know Dobbs pretty well. He's a very, very unique individual. Absolutely. Yeah. And the intelligence, not just with the application of an actual rocket scientist,
right.
How he's able to shorten the learning curve on what it is that he's doing, because it is nothing short of incredible, honestly.
Yeah, he's a very impressive young man.
Absolutely. So that breakdown on the NFL matchup show this week, as well as many others. A great Thursday night football game. I know that's not going to be on the matchup.
No, I'm looking forward to the game, though. It's a really big game. Really.
Yeah. Big. The Ravens with the opportunity to basically knock the Bengals out of it, even at 5-4. The AFC North is getting pretty crowded, and it is certainly going to be a fascinating week 11 in the NFL this week, Greg.
No question. Then we have Thanksgiving. So, hey, we're getting there, Buck. We're getting there.
More football. I don't know where I'm getting, Greg, but by God, the NFL is getting there.
Yeah, let's a couple of more weeks, and unfortunately, you might start hearing Titans fans talking about the NFL draft.
Oh no, Greg! I had the first requests for tackle talk today on the radio show, and I looked at my producer and I said, "I'm not ready yet. I can't do it. Not just yet, but we will see." Greg, appreciate your time as always. I will see you next Wednesday, my friend.
Thanks, Buck.